Hey Phil, what's up, man?
Hey, Moisés, you sound a little
Hey,
different today.
hey, it's gonna be a groovy weekend, man. Let me tell you, some important stuff about grass happened as regards Austin. The ruling came down from on high, man. Because Lumen Field is keeping the grass from Club World Cup for Austin's game against Seattle on Saturday, man.
Oh, you're talking about Lumen Field. I was a little
Yeah.
worried. I thought, are we in 1975? Are you gonna pick me up in an Econoline van and we're gonna go see Aerosmith?
Yeah, man, it's gonna be a great time.
So, grass,
Nothing makes me happier
not
than
not the turf, not the notorious turf that normally Seattle, a place where things grow a lot. Trees are big. You can grow grass there. Of course,
yeah.
you also have football players that would be playing on said grass, which I think is a lot of the reason that they do turf. But yeah, actually, Jeremiah O'Shawn from Sounder at Heart, we're going to feature him doing a three questions, which should be up as you're listening to this on Saturday at some point during the day. I was just thinking about reaching out to him. Then Moises texted me and said,
I
"Have
was
you
like
talked to
urgent.
Jeremiah?"
The,
Yeah.
the
And
the
then
the only question that I need answered. Forget everything else. This is the only thing that matters about this game.
Right. And then Jeremiah reached out to me and said, "Hey, you want to trade stuff?" It's like I was just about to reach out to you. And of course, I was in an REI. So of course I was.
There you
to get that kind of Seattle Austin connection going. Of course I was in an REI.
go. Yeah, I'm sure there are actually important things that we'll talk about, but look, man, you're from Seattle. Grass is
Mm-hmm.
important, man.
Emergency podcast. They did a thing, so we gotta talk about it. Emergency podcast. It's an emergency. Emergency podcast. Shut up, hurry up, shut up, hurry up, shut up. Emergency podcast. It's an emergency.
Hey, a hearty hello to you all, and welcome to Emergency Podcast, the Austin FC podcast where we talk about all the Austin FC emergencies. Like today, my trusty Chaco sandals that a certain former member of the Austin FC communications team hated that I wore them, criticized me, thought I should be wearing any other shoe, complimented me when I was not wearing those sandals. The sandal that when Diego Fagundez had his farewell party at Hopsquad, I went over just trying to look cool and shake his hand and everything and stepped on an errant flare that somebody had thrown down and did not feel a thing thanks to the soles on those shoes. They have finally
Wow.
given out, so I had to go replace them. So Chaco 1 is dead. Long live Chaco 2. Moises, how are you doing?
I'm good. This episode of Emergency Podcast brought to you by Chacos, the sandals that can step on flares. We've got a scared money derby tonight with the second team going on, playing through the international break. It has not been an international break for them, or at least to the extent that it was for the first team. We got the first team away in Seattle, missing one Mirto Uzuni potentially, who is questionable based on his hamstring.
We'll get to that.
There's excitement abounding. There's Club World Cup round of 16 stuff going on. There's Gold
Mhm.
Cup stuff going on. There's just a lot of soccer happening right now, Phil. So it's a very exciting time.
Almost too much. But first, we've got to talk about the All Star game.
Yes,
And actually,
indeed.
okay. All right.
All right.
So, July 22nd, as you may have heard, the All Star game is coming to Austin, Texas. You may have heard one Lionel Messi is going to be part of that, and tickets seem to be indicating that Messi is going to be in town. And two Austin players are going to be there. Of course, we've got Brad Stuver, which think everybody expected that might happen. Lifetime Achievement Award, pretty great for him. Very, very proud, very happy that that happened. And then Brandon Vasquez returning to the All Star team that he backed into in 2022, but he had really, really good numbers to back that up. Now, not so much. He has 5 goals. Sam Surridge, who got passed over, has 15 goals right now. He got another 3 in Wednesday night's game. He was on 12. Actually, 7 of the 10 leading goal scorers in MLS right now were passed over from the All-Star team. So if you score goals, that doesn't necessarily mean that you are an all-star. It just means that you score goals.
Hey, you're too busy scoring goals. You're too busy scoring goals to play in an all star game. You got to keep scoring those goals, even though there's not other games going on because of the all star game. But that's what I'm going with. It's that they need to be allowed to keep focusing on the thing that they're already doing so well.
Right. So I was going to ask if you were surprised by the Vasquez selection, but all the
No.
marketing materials had Vasquez on there. So I guess
Well,
they throw us a big clue that, hey, this might happen.
I think there are a few different things at play where, I mean, there is a cynical way to go, oh, well, this is just MLS marketing and they're trying to make something that they think is going to attract people who are fans of men's national team players or something like that. Maybe that's a part of it, but I think it's a more complex equation. And in the case of Vasquez, he's a talented player. He most recently played in Liga MX. He is very well known to his coach at this point. If his coach had to pick one of his three DPs to make his second selection of two, which even though people also have said, oh, well, Nico had 12 picks and he only picked two Austin players. It's kind of a gentleman's agreement kind of thing that you're not going to fill your 12 selections with players from just your team. It's understood that as coach, if not otherwise selected, you're going to pick two players from your team, and that is the above board way of doing it. Stuver was the no-brainer. And then again, among the DPs, I think you got to pick Vasquez over Buka, certainly not Uzuni, for just look at his stat sheet. To invert the stats thing about Sam Surridge and people scoring lots of goals. There's another element to this that I've speculated on, which is that knowing that Austin was the host city team going into 25 and knowing that he was very much going to want to be positioned well for the 2026 World Cup, playing in an all-star game alongside, presumably, as we now know for sure, unless he gets injured, Messi, not a bad way to get some attention when you expect, and I don't think he expected his league play to be where it's at. He certainly expects more of himself, has expected more goals of himself, has expected more success out of his own team than he's seen so far. But knowing that there would be that adjustment period to the club that he moved to from Monterrey, I feel like part of the conversation in getting him here potentially involved dangling, look, if you take this deal, if you will make this move, if you will do this, then the coach is going to pick a couple of players from this team. And you're obviously going to be one of those two players.
Yeah.
I think that's an effective sweetening of a deal that to me doesn't feel underhanded, doesn't feel, I don't know, bad in any way. To me, that's the kind of further incentive that Austin had to dangle in advance of this All-Star season. Not everybody can just enjoy basking in the glow of many MLS owners coming to the same city at the same time.
Right. My friend Ian Quillen over at MLS Multiplex had an interesting take on this as well. By making Brandon Vasquez an all-star, Nico Estevez takes a calculated risk, is what he says. And the idea here is that maybe this is something that will be motivational for Vasquez to finally score in the way that everybody expected him to when he got here. He says since his arrival in the Texas capital, while he's consistently gotten into dangerous situations, he's also been arguably the most wasteful striker in the league. His 5 goals lead Verde, which are still scoring less than 1 per match as a team. His expected goals totals say he should have nearly twice that, as we know, is his G minus XG. We know about that. And then he says, obviously, the quotes that Nico had that we covered earlier in the week. And the kind of idea is that, you know, Vasquez obviously is going to know there that he's the least productive of those MLS All-Star strikers. And then it's up to Vasquez how to interpret it. Could be reassuring to know his club is unlikely to aggressively seek a potential competitor for his minutes in the secondary transfer window. And maybe that's exactly what's needed to help the 26-year-old find more efficiency. But then he also brings up Tyler Miller, which is my favorite coach selects player. Actually, Ian is from the DC area, so we had much chortling over that when I was in DC in 23. And of course, Wayne Rooney was the coach at the time for DC United, all-star manager Wayne Rooney.
Yep.
Weird things to say, things that you do not expect to say in, say, 2015 or 2016, but that is the glory and the beauty of MLS. And then, yes, he did select Tyler Miller as one of his goalkeepers, and Miller was not a starter by the end of the year. So again, some cautionary tales can abound. I'm hopeful that this is something that motivates Vasquez. And again, I think that he had a very, very slow start to the season. We do see him rounding into form right now, and I would hope by the time that we are in all-star land that he's a double-digit goals or close to it. I don't think that's unrealistic.
I don't either. To the point you just made there, I think there are multiple variables that play into this. Would I have also liked to see a Mikkel Dessler? Sure, but he should also take it easy a bit because he's still coming back from injury. Would I have liked to see a Brendan
Yeah.
Hines-Ike?
Mm-hmm.
Absolutely. If there were more opportunity to get multiple players on, which I think would have in part come from just general team performance, because look, Vancouver's got 4 guys on the roster. 4 guys.
Yep. Yep.
That
It's a lot of guys.
That's a lot. It's a lot of guys, but also look at the first half of the season that Vancouver has had. And when you look at justifying it, you've got the cross section of the fan / player / pundit selections on top of the coach selections. And if Austin had the first half of the season that Vancouver did, do I think realistically he could have had 4 Austin guys on that roster, 2 of them possibly selected by the fan pundit player vote and 2 of them by himself? Absolutely. And I think justifiably that's just the way the All-Star cookie crumbles.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, the other thing about Vancouver too, 3 of those 4 were voted in. So Blackman, Berhalter, and Brian White, of course, were all voted in. Takawaka is the only one who was a coach's selection, and he's quite deserving. I think he's one of the 3 best goalkeepers in the league this year. So I'm good with all those selections. Former Austin FC player Sebastian Berhalter is an all-star.
The other 2 best goalkeepers in the league, Brad Stuver and Dane St. Clair. Guess what? All 3 of them are on the MLS All-Star roster. But yes, Sebastian Berhalter, Austin boy done good, who there was some chatter of, he got done dirty by Claudio Reyna. Some people even said Austin didn't know what they had. I think that having the rough experience in Austin is part of what polished up some rough edges on this kid, because he wasn't great when he was here.
No, he was not.
He was not. I think it's fascinating looking at the early years of Austin as a club, as a development tool that people survived, in some cases flourished in hazing. Others. But it's hazing. That's what it is. Illegal in some places. Some people think it's necessary. A lot of people think that the 1950s should stay in the 1950s.
It was also a bad night for hindsight. So the same night that Berhalter gets selected to the All-Star team, that's made official. Obviously, it happened earlier with the vote. Former Austin SC trialist Milan Olaski scores 4 goals for San Diego in a 5-3 victory over Vancouver. Interestingly, in Vancouver, in BC Place, which means that by a second or third tiebreaker, it's the goals for San Diego is now leading the West, and Vancouver is now in second. I expect that will change a little bit. Again, earlier this week, of course, talked about the strength of schedule and how Austin has it relatively easy, very, very easy the rest of the way. If you want some deep dive math, you should look at that. But San Diego has a appreciably hard schedule in the second half of the season. Of course, Vancouver was one of those games. They handled that just fine, but it's going to be really interesting to see. I still expect Vancouver to be, if not Shield winners, the West leaders, but San Diego certainly making a case that they could indeed win it, or at least be in second, which is pretty remarkable for an expansion team. And they also got quite a few all-stars too as well.
And also, are they looking at trying to perform well enough that they steer directly into the expansion team curse that has afflicted some other expansion teams, where you do great in that first season and then your second season doesn't go so well?
Or you do great in that second season and then fall off a cliff. Not naming names.
Not any reason to name names there. But I think the strength of the All-Star squad is pretty good. We'll see the remainder of the Liga MX roster. A certain number of those names have already been announced a couple of weeks ago from their Balón de Oro nominations. They automatically put a certain number of guys on their roster from their annual awards. But since we don't have the rest of that roster, I don't feel good about making any kind of prognostication of full squad versus full squad, because we're missing half of the other one. But just looking at the MLS one, I like what I'm seeing. I like the overall mix of guys, and I hope that, more than anything, I hope that it just motivates Nico Estevez to lean further into earlier subs. Because, oh man, have his guys performed better with earlier subs than later subs this season? Don't know why I harp on that and have something like post-traumatic stress from seeing 2 late subs in Austin FC matches, Phil. No reason I could possibly feel that way. My overall vibe on All-Star is, I think it's a good roster. I think that as crazy as the aftermarket tickets went immediately right after they announced that Messi was on the roster. It's gonna be a zoo. It's gonna be crazy. There will be locals watching this at watch parties rather than in the stadium because of the Messi effect. We have not had an MLS All-Star game that has had that kind of Messi effect. We've had them affected by, oh, they're playing Arsenal. Oh, they're playing this international club. That is a historical thing, but we have not seen that happen at Q2.
Well, it was happening with Columbus last year, and then he got injured. So there was a Messi effect, and yet no Messi by the end
Columbus,
of it, so.
Columbus got to be the training ground for the Messi All-Star effect.
The first pancake of the MLS All-Star Messi experience.
Indeed.
Let's talk a little bit about Saturday. As we mentioned before, there was going to be grass on Lumen Field. That will be unusual. How did that look to you? You are the big Club World Cup connoisseur this time around. You watched kind of more games on that than anybody else. Of course, actually, the Inter River Plate match, that was in Seattle, I believe.
Totally.
And that was, so the fighting and Driussi having a lot of jerks as teammates, as it turned out, that happened there.
People will say this about Libertadores. It gets spicy. People talk about Conca Chaos. Have you watched Libertadores? Because South America gets real spicy. And one of the things that we saw in that Inter River Plate match, with 2 River players sent off, 2 River players on suspension, and Driussi injured for the rest of the tournament, which for River was shorter than it is for others. You saw this kind of Libertadores single elimination kind of energy in Acuna, who did not care what kind of a suspension he was given, because it wasn't going to matter, because they were going to lose. They're going to be out of the competition. And this is something that you see. This is something that builds some of those grudge matches between ultras in South American soccer, is when you have nothing left to lose, just how childishly crazy do you get? And that's just a thing that happens. For it to happen on the world stage, I think it's totally fair to look at it and consider it as embarrassing or an insult to the sport and the dignity.
I'll get there.
I think all that's totally reasonable. I think all that's totally reasonable. What makes it more unfortunate to me is that everybody has been very open and straightforward about Club World Cup. It's all money. It's just a giant bag of Saudi public investment fund money. It's a matter of how big of that bag do you take home. Auckland City, people are like, why are they even playing? Because they went home with $10 million no matter what they did. Come on. That for a semi-pro team, $10 million is generationally changing, right?
Oh, yeah, absolutely.
But for a team like River Plate, who have played in previous versions of the Club World Cup, South American teams really took this tournament seriously on a reputational basis. And as we've seen with all 4 Brazilian teams making it to the round of 16, there are big stakes for those clubs. So, yeah, I expected that it was going to get spicy. It was going to get bad if it looked like River was going to suffer some sort of a face-losing loss. And that is absolutely what it looked like, not even from the second goal, but from the first goal. From the first goal, it just felt like the momentum was definitely against them. The red card certainly did not help. They knew they were headed toward something bad once that first goal was scored.
Right. You could tell why Inter were Champions League finalists this year.
Yeah. With a brand new coach, this is their 3rd game under new coach Kivu, who used to play for Inter. People would remember him for his distinctive headwear if they were watching European soccer at the time. Playing a very similar system to the way that Inter has, because look, these are the players that he's got, but also rotating in younger players. And it looks like Inter is going to become a younger squad, which it needs to do by necessity. And we may see a change in the formation that they have been known for so many years. But the most important thing, Phil, is the grass. As you mentioned, the grass.
Oh, the other important thing about Inter is those jerseys slapped.
Oh, absolutely. Absolutely. The new jerseys for Club World Cup are absolutely fantastic and leagues better than the horrible away jersey that they had to play that Champions League final in. And I'm fully convinced that they were cursed by it.
Those were jersey. As ugly as these new kits were beautiful.
I completely agree. I've got quite a collection of Inter kits of my own and have very particular opinions on them. And as somebody who covers a team that is big on stripes, just with a different color alternate to black than Verde, there are so many things that I think about with Inter kits where I'm like, oh, eventually Austin might try something like X or Y.
Take note, Adidas designers. Look at what they did there.
You could do some
stuff
from Nike.
Really cool things with Verde in that scheme.
Yeah,
But the
it was
grass.
before various circumstances of the world things came up about how the current administration was handling security at the gate of these games. I was actually thinking about going to that game. That was the one that I wanted to go to most.
Yeah.
Was that last group stage game against River, because I expected it was going to be great. I expected that I would be heavily in the minority, that it would be massively overrun by River fans, which it was, who were children crying in the stands that they got on TV. It was everything. Not that I like seeing children cry in the stands. And my heart goes out to River fans who, saw their team go down in ignominious defeat like absolute chumps and losers. That's just an objective view. That's not my opinion. That's
Depending
just
on
how
the
they
team,
looked.
is it kind of horrible of me to say that I kind of enjoy children crying in the stands if it is certain
Hey,
teams?
you said that,
Not all
Phil.
teams, not children generally.
Okay. You can send your email feedback to Phil West. When we hit a really dry week, we should do that kind of a draft. Is what teams child fans do we enjoy watching cry the most? We could probably fill an hour and a half with that.
Tottenham, Chelsea.
Tottenham, Chelsea. I mean, easy. There we go. All right, we're done. But yeah, it was great to watch people play soccer in that stadium on real grass. Same similar thing has happened in other locations during Club World Cup. And the thing that was out there was people were saying they're going to switch the turf back over. They can switch the turf over and settle it in 12 hours. They can do it in the 3-day window between the Inter-River match and Austin going there to play Seattle. And why do that if it's perfectly good grass? Why rush it?
Mm-hmm.
And so I said, based on nothing other than just thinking about it from a facilities management point of view, if it still works, leave it in.
Yeah.
If the Seahawks don't need to play on it the next day, then who cares?
I was at US Panama in Seattle in 2013, where they laid grass over the turf, and that was ridiculously bad grass. This is not that.
No.
It was bumpy.
That was CONCACAF rolling out carpet over turf. And this is FIFA going, here's how much corrupt Saudi money is going into this. And here's exactly how good this and this and this is going to be. And you're not going to screw up putting grass down on turf fields, or you're not getting your giant bag of corrupt money.
Yeah, but you pay for it, apparently.
Exactly. So yeah, people were throwing around word, and a particularly prescient prognosticator of the game, Seth Rao, was pretty convinced that they would swap it out, and was citing to me articles where they were saying the plan is not for grass to be back there permanently. And I said, yeah, I've seen that too. But I just have a feeling that their grounds crew is going to not want to do a super fast turnaround after having had a couple of real pain in the ass weeks of Club World Cup to deal with.
Mm-hmm.
If it's still in good shape, I have a feeling they'll probably let it hang around. And then said a guy of many sources himself, heard himself, that if it holds up well, then the plan is to leave it in place for the Austin game. And I went, aha, validation. I've won. And then we got word from our friend to the northwest that indeed it is staying in place. And that's the only question that I want to ask whichever player they give us after that match is, so what was it like playing on real grass in Seattle? Yeah, was it like heaven? Because it looked like heaven. It looks great on TV. Word is that it went down really well and that it worked really nicely. It'd be great if Seattle had their own soccer-specific stadium and didn't have to share. That would be glorious. But once your stadium is put into The Last of Us, the TV show, I guess you only get to have one stadium anymore.
Yeah. And part of the reason they got the stadium in the first place was there was a football soccer combo. Like, I don't think they would have gotten the stadium without football plus soccer forces doing that, though.
We need the Sounders to win MLS Cup 5 years in a row so that they can be given a soccer specific stadium for good deeds.
Yeah, I am happy with more stadiums in Seattle. They're actually tearing down Memorial Stadium, which is like an old high school stadium in Seattle Center, which is where some of the women's teams were playing. Anyway, that's our Seattle Stadium report. Let's get to Azuni being questionable with a hamstring. Speaking of things that are not going well, curious about that. And I imagine with that announcement there that we're maybe not going to necessarily see him in Seattle. Maybe he is ready for LAFC. Certainly something that we're going to want to ask Nico about on Saturday night, I imagine, depending on how things go at left wing. Again, there's of course big questions about Azuni. Where do you play him? How is he going to be after this international break that he had, seeing his child, getting away? Does it get his mindset right? And we're apparently maybe not going to be able to see that or see him in very, very limited action. Questionable hamstring does not sound like, yeah, they're going to roll him out there at all. I would expect him not to play.
I would expect him not to play, and it could be that they listed him questionable from his hamstring. Look, I'm not going to allege dark arts stuff going on or something, but it could be.
Roster dark
Let's give him
arts.
another weekend with his kid. And it's, Mirto, looking at it over this Zoom video, your hamstring looks very questionable, sir. You should stay in Spain. You should stay in Madrid for another weekend and just see how you rehab that on a beach somewhere. Maybe catch some rays, see how that works. Because there are, calling somebody out for that rather than like extending their vacation. I don't know what like contractual or like league rule stuff there is for that kind of thing. I don't know.
He could have reported back and he could have tweaked it in training as well.
That's true.
So
totally
we
true.
don't know necessarily. Obviously, day job, I don't get out to the weeklies. You were not able to go to the weekly this week. And the way that they've run those this year, actually, we get way less glimpses as a media core of what's going on in the practice field than we used to, perhaps by design.
I think very much by design. A lot of times we'll sit there in that lobby for half an hour after the originally stated time. But yeah, for whatever reason it is, I'm not that worried about Uzuni being out. Austin does have another buyout. I'll just say it. Austin does have another buyout.
That's premature, I think. Maybe.
That's premature, but Austin does have another buyout. And we're about to head into the summer transfer window. And freeing that up, if you have a replacement option, I wouldn't say that it's out of the question. I'm not saying it's likely at all. There are any number of variables that can be out there, and I'll just repeat what I've said in the past, which is I would love nothing more than to see Mirto Uzuni come into form and show the goal-scoring madness that he has been capable of in the past. And whatever, I think it's going to be a good weekend against a depleted, beat-up, demoralized Seattle squad that really did expect to do a bit better than they did in Club World Cup. As we predicted, they had exactly the punishing experience that we expected them to. And if anything, like the way that Schmetzer talked, it came off similar to the Auckland City coach. It was like, well, they're going to get out there and they're going to do the very best and they're going to try.
That's one of my questions to Jeremiah. Yeah, I'm wondering, are they really demoralized now? Are they going to be flat and disinterested, or is it like, oh, finally a more beatable team and they're going to get excited and go on a tear?
But also, are they depleted at the back? And people have, there has been
the suspensions,
right? The suspensions, right? There has been that thing of, oh no, please, Seattle, don't play your teenagers. But teenage defenders, that's a different thing than teenage midfielders and forwards. It can be.
Lawyer guy was a fullback. Reed Baker Writing, I think his name was.
This could be exactly the scenario that we prognosticated as being ideal for Austin. It could also be a nightmare of young guy replacements that they don't have as much or enough tape on.
Right. I would rather have Austin face Seattle away now, right after this Club World Cup, versus say late August, when everybody's back, where they're recovered, where they're on their kind of usual second half roll. I'm going to assume that that's what they're doing. But then we also thought, oh, Seattle's catching Vancouver away at an advantageous time. And boy, were we wrong.
Oh boy, were we wrong.
Maybe it would have been 8-1 or 9-1 had they caught them at a different time. Maybe it was a good time and Vancouver only won by 4 goals. And it could have been worse.
Yeah, there like the transitive property of, you look at that loss against Vancouver and then you look at what we did to teams that then beat Vancouver, and it becomes, there's something with this Austin squad. They just haven't found that cohesion yet. And arguably, I think we saw that cohesion in the last 2 league games that they played. And I feel like going into 2 league games leading into a win-or-go-home match against San Jose in the Open Cup, I think we're in for a really interesting 3-match run as of right now.
And that's the thing. 2 matches are not necessarily a winning streak. 3 is. So that gets decided here on Saturday. Is this a really good stretch? Are they on this big upswing right now. Even if it's a loss and they get 6 out of 9 points in June, that's great. That's much better,
nice, is
obviously,
what it
than
is.
they got in 7 games in May. But if they do get a draw or a win, then that's absolutely fantastic. And then momentum heading into that LAFC match, which is going to be July 5th at home, fireworks, and it's going to be a little less handsome than we thought it was going
Just
to
a
be.
little less handsome.
We have a little
bit less handsome, bit
of
less French.
depressing news.
Olivier Giroud, farewell game at the Bank, but it's the Bank of Montreal instead of the Bank of California, as we've said in LA this weekend on Saturday. His last game for LAFC so that he can go play in League for Lille. Phil, I'm going to plant my flag on. I previously made a prediction regarding a streak, and that was that Austin was going to break the winless streak. They broke the winless streak. I think they're going to go back-to-back wins against these two Club World Cup chewed-up teams.
Ooh. Okay.
Confidently. I think it's reasonable. I don't think it is being too optimistic. I think that they're more than capable of doing it. I'm not in the mindset of if they don't, well, then something is wrong. Because as we both know, millions of things can happen in a match. You can suddenly have a key center back go down injured and it completely changes the momentum of the match. You can have other crazy things happen, and incredibly shocking crazy things have happened. I am big on the notion that the incredible crazy things that could happen are unexpected breakout form against both of these teams that are very much in regrouping mode, that are figuring out what does the rest of LAFC's season look like, players being in their heads about what their future with that club looks like. Do they want to move? Does Bouanga want to go to Club America?
Right.
Bogert threw cold water on that as being nonsense at the moment, but that he included the words at the moment doesn't mean that there's nothing there. It means that it's not actively being papered, which is where Bogert's sources really come in clutch. I think that coming on Seattle being more chewed up than LAFC, I think I could say, and going into LAFC where you've got a bunch of players who are like, so where in the world am I moving to after this season? Because there's going to be a new manager. There's going to be some sort of a roster rebuild. Is the sporting operation going to start some of that in the summer window? And are some of those moves that are not even as prominent as Giroud and Bouanga, are some of those moves already happening? Maybe. And I feel like them coming to Austin's ground is going to potentially be a case of Cherundolo maybe underestimating Estevez the way that he did Josh Wolf a couple of years ago. And there being a not so great result for LAFC when they come to Austin. That's just the way that I feel like the arc of those two games is going. And that is the ideal thing that I think would feed into the Open Cup game. And even if it goes completely the other way, if somehow both of those games are losses, I think that gives them a different kind of fuel going into the Open Cup game.
Right. But if they are, you're positing this theory here that they are going to be on a 4-game win streak heading into the Open Cup, which is a very interesting prospect. Of course, San Jose is also playing that same night, so they're going to be on the same amount of rest or lack thereof as it may be, because it is Saturday to Wednesday. Of course, Austin does have to travel to the West Coast. Airport, by the way, right next to the stadium, so they'll be able to see where they're playing on that Sun Country charter coming in. Or if it is still that, I'm not sure that is what it is necessarily.
As far as I know, it is.
That's what it was at one time. Sun Country. I've never flown Sun Country. I don't know about you.
Not a lot of people chartering flights for me.
They do commercial work too, though.
I'm not traveling that much these days.
Right.
And I'm bouncing from coast to coast.
Certainly not to a Sun Country. We have plenty of sun in this part of the country right here. All right, then heading into, of course, that Open Cup match, and we'll talk about that as we get a little bit closer to that. I'm very excited about that, actually. I'm in a way more excited about seeing how they're going to fare in Open Cup than these next two league games. But again, these are good tests. Seattle and LAFC are teams that are right around the same spot Austin is in the table. If they can get those wins against those teams, or if they can get at least results against those teams, then I think it bodes well for them in terms of, if not outright moving into possibly that contention of that top 4, at least that moves them more solidly into playoff position, which is an interesting thing to say given the sky is falling nature of the last few weeks, where we wondered if they were going to stay below the playoff line. But again, this is a weird league where a couple of wins or a couple of losses can propel you or plunge you into depths.
Yeah, it's going to be an interesting month. If we're heading into these next two games and we're looking at Izuni not being available to start, you got Brandon up top and you got presumably Gallagher and Buka on the wings. That's worked pretty well.
I think it's time for Taylor to see what he can do, though,
Yeah.
if that's the case. And I would almost expect that maybe he would start then on Saturday.
Yeah, I think that the safe choice being Gallagher, depending on how Taylor's recovery has been going, it is not a bad thing at all. And even if it's we see Taylor for the July 5th game getting the start and subbing him in at 60 for this one, I think that's reasonable and that's smart in trying to prevent re-injury. But yeah, I think we're in for some fireworks if we see him start on Saturday.
Mm-hmm. And then we're definitely in for fireworks the next week.
Yeah, I mean, we've been promised.
Yes.
Do you want to talk a little bit of Club World Cup, Gold Cup, since there's all this soccer going on now that we know what the
let's hit that
round
real
of
quick.
16 teams are going to look like?
Yeah. So we talked about Club World Cup a little bit with Inter and River and that hoo-ha. And there was similar nonsense that happened between Canada and El Salvador. El Salvador managed to get 2 players sent off by halftime and a coach sent off at halftime, an assistant coach rather. That ended up being Canada beating 9-man El Salvador 2-0 to secure their place into the round of 16. And Sunday, if you are looking for Gold Cup action, if you're looking to park yourself in front of the TV for 5 hours, which you're listening to the show, that is, you are the target market for this. Canada plays Guatemala, and then US plays Costa Rica, a team that they have traditionally had some trouble with here and there. So it should be an interesting doubleheader. They seem like they are on a possible collision course to the semis now. I think it's going to be. I think we're still looking at a possible US-Mexico final bracket, or again, if it's the semis, I would say we're heading towards a Canada-Mexico. I think Canada beats the US.
As somebody who hasn't been watching, but has been watching the results, has been watching the highlights and everything, I think that's not only likely, but I think that's the fun. Like, that's the fun version of where things go to me. That's the matchup that I want to see.
Canada's more fun and more loose right now.
On the general topic of fun and loose and matchups, the way that the round of 16 bracketing has ended up for Club World Cup has been amazing in some respects. And in some respects, it's like, hey, guess what? You're getting to watch UCL, but in the United States. Some of the more
Which has been the dream, right?
That's the dream. I hate that it is either PSG or Inter Miami have to go on Sunday, because both of them continuing through the competition would be more interesting. But there is a round of 16 match that really is, there's absolutely no way Inter Miami's going to win that, because people were saying the same thing about them getting out of the group, and they topped their group. So we're not worrying about weird new FIFA group stage calculations and that kind of thing. Do we think that retiree Barcelona can win against young and fresh PSG? I don't know that you want to put it past those retiree Barcelona players that they cannot dig deep and beat the hot young kids of the UEFA Champions League.
What is the saying about old age and cunning versus youth and skill? Or
it doesn't matter. The old man will knife you every time.
Right. I think that's kind of the point of that.
Yeah, that's the way that I sum it up. You can be a fancy young lad in the best form of your life, but if you get your throat slit, well, it doesn't really matter, does it? To me, the most interesting vibes that I have from some of the round of 16 matchups, Palmeiras and Botafogo, is a rematch from last year's Copa Libertadores.
Yeah.
In which, due to a goal being disallowed, Palmeiras was no longer tied with Botafogo on aggregate and eliminated.
Will there be stadium announcements in Portuguese?
Maybe. I hope so. That'd be great. I think it's great that that's one of the round of 16 matches, is a Libertadores literal rematch from that knockout stage.
Right.
Whichever one of those teams wins would then play the winner of Benfica Chelsea. And it could just be a very Portuguese quarter of the quarterfinals, or it could be a Brasileiro Serie A team against Chelsea, which is way more interesting to me. Break out of sticking to the same language. So the next bracket down, Inter versus Fluminense. Another one of the giants of Brazil. The Brazilians are doing very well this tournament. I'll say, if anybody is winning Club World Cup right now, it is the entire nation of Brazil. Inter Fluminense, my bias is on record. It would be a great comeback story for them under a brand new coach, the fourth match under a new coach, to beat one of the Giants of Brazil that are in very, very good form.
Right.
They will play, and here's where the quarterfinals start to actually get really interesting for me. The winner of that match plays the winner of Man City versus Al Hilal. Al Hilal, whose new coach is former Inter coach Simone Inzaghi, the man who was coaching these players in a Champions League final 3 games ago.
Oh,
so it is possible that the quarterfinals will see a club playing their former coach, and Al Hilal playing Man City is probably the happiest that the Middle East investment funds are about a matchup. One of the global giants.
Right.
Playing in a venue that people will actually see the match. And Al Hilal, it's not like they're playing poorly or they don't have good players or something like that, but it's just the big breakthrough, the thing that they wanted that giant bag of corrupt money to do. They're literally getting it, so good for them. That's one side of the bracket. On the other side of the bracket, we got PSG Inter Miami, and then right next to them, Flamengo versus Bayern Munich. Flamengo versus Bayern Munich, like PSG Inter Miami, another one of the most interesting matchups because you've got a Brazilian team playing a German team. Come on, when do you get to see that? So it could be Bayern versus PSG in the quarters, which, okay, great.
We've seen that.
Flamengo Inter Miami. Come on.
Oh my God.
Yes. Come on.
That's a party.
That is a party. That is a party. And not even knowing where that particular match would be played, that's the kind of thing that if it were played in Miami, Hard Rock Stadium may not exist afterward. It could be just rendered to the ground. So then in the bottom of the bracket, we've got Real Madrid versus Juventus. Okay, another UCL match.
Sure. Yeah.
And to me, my favorite matchup in the whole round of 16, Dortmund versus Monterrey.
Okay.
Dortmund versus Monterrey. You've got two very different styles. You've got two teams that have never had a reason to meet before. Actually, I may have this wrong because I haven't paid that much attention to the now derelict version of the Club World Cup. They might have actually played each other in one of those. It's possible. But that's one of those things that a Club World Cup should be an opportunity to see teams that you never get to see play. So the quarterfinals could be Monterrey versus Real Madrid, Bayern versus Inter Miami.
Oh my God.
The combinations going into those quarters could be absolutely fascinating. And there could be a Club World Cup final of Inter Miami versus Inter Milan. There could be a Club World Cup final of Manchester City versus Monterrey.
Right.
Of Real Madrid versus Botafogo. Those possibilities are still on the board is fascinating to me. And there are a lot of things they should definitely improve for the 2029 edition. Both in terms of tiebreaker rules and yellow card suspensions that I think were maybe preventative of measures that they burned some of the fun out of the group stage. The weekend and the next couple days of next week are going to be an opportunity to watch a lot of really good soccer, just holding your nose at the money that you know is involved.
So in other words, if you were not thrilled with the matchups that ended up happening in Leagues Cup last year, this might be a tournament more to your liking.
Yeah, that's why they changed the Leagues Cup group stage so that everything is interleague until the knockout stages.
What we wanted to see.
That's what everybody was asking for, and I'm glad that major multinational organizations are actually listening.
They heard us when we complained about Dallas, Kansas City matches in Leagues Cup last year.
God, don't get me started.
You know that emergency podcast? They're right.
They're listening.
Get more of these.
And while they're listening, yes, we will take a private box. That'd be
absolutely
fully acceptable at the venue of our choosing and with a travel account.
We will say nice things.
So which of the round of 16 matches are you most excited about or interested in watching when not watching Gold Cup?
I would say that Inter Miami PSG, just because I am curious to see how the MLS super team is going to fare against the Champions League champions. Plus, there's that kind of Messi played for PSG and now is playing against PSG. It's a different PSG, obviously, than when he was there. And also, it's a PSG that won a Champions League, which Messi and Neymar together and Mbappe together could not do. So That's interesting. There's going to be a little bit of dynamic from those PSG players of, well, you couldn't do it. We were able to do it. So I think that's got an opportunity to be a little spicy just because of that. I think Messi will be pretty motivated in that game, and motivated Messi, as we know, is a lot of fun.
Yeah. It'll be a hell of an 11 a.m. Sunday soccer match.
Motivated Messi is fun unless you were rooting for France in the World Cup final.
Fair, totally fair.
So, all right, that will do it for this week. And again, late night Seattle match, 9:40 start time for us here in the Central Time Zone. West Coast is adhering to their dumb West Coast time zone things. I will stay up super late, as will you, for a midnight press conference. We'll have coverage, of course, and then next week we'll get into the LAFC fireworks and the Q2 Stadium fireworks, and we're going to talk a little Open Cup as well.
That is like the worst thing I've ever heard in the history of the 7 years that I've been on this planet.